That will conclude our public participation and take us to item number 14, which is action on, as necessary on appropriate on matters discussed in executive session. And I believe we only have one item, item 2A, that needs a motion. Do I have a motion? Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we approve the selected employment items as shown in Exhibit A.
Have a second. Ms. Baumgartner seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Brings us to item number 15, which is our second and final reading of grading assessment systems shown in Exhibit B. Do I have a motion? Mr. Halterwanger.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the second and final reading of the proposed revision to policy, board policy IKA-R, grading assessment systems located in Exhibit B.
Have a second. Ms. Hammond seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Brings us to item 16, which is second and final reading approval of revisions to board policy, the evaluation of the superintendent shown in Exhibit C. I have a motion. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we give second and final reading approval of proposed revisions to Board Policy CBI, Evaluation of Superintendent, as shown in Exhibit C.
We have a second. Mr. Cates, second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Gann.
Mr. Cates.
My understanding, the evaluation process is typically spelled out in the contract of the superintendent. I know it is in Dr. Hefner's, and that's why we do a written summary that's for his personnel file. So I know we address it in that way. Would it be prudent at the end of the first paragraph, and I think that would be a standard part of most any contract, so I know it's addressed there. But at the end of the first paragraph, after the sentence shall be included in the evaluation process, at the end of that sentence, to say a written summary will be provided to the superintendent and placed in his file, his or her file.
Any other discussion? Ms. Hammond?
Mr. Gant, I think we did it last time, but I know we moved this up to get it done with the one reading, or it's two readings, excuse me, last time and this time. Can you address, because I know we had good reasoning for what struck, can you or Dr. Hefner address that? We're in Exhibit C, right?
Yes.
And we struck two paragraphs. I mean, I'm just asking our reasoning so the public will know.
The main reason for that was to simplify and to follow the superintendent's contract. The contract calls for the evaluation and the stipulations in it.
So this
As
verbiage was not needed that we struck.
We were advised by our attorney, who in this particular case advised that we could eliminate this language and still be within the contract and not restrict ourselves. Any other discussion? Mr. Cates, you made a great point. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent, by adding at the end of the first paragraph a new sentence that states a written summary of the superintendent's evaluation will be provided to the superintendent and placed in his personnel file.
His or her.
His or her. Thank you.
All right, do we have a second to the amendment? Ms. Hutchison seconds. Any further discussion to the amendment proposed by Mr. Cates? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to amend the language to add the written summary, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Takes us back to the original motion, which was to approve the policy as now amended. And without any further discussion on that, seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. So thank you very much. That brings us to item number 17, which is a second and final reading approval of proposed revisions to the board policy on the qualifications of the superintendent shown in Exhibit D. Do I have a motion? Mr. Cates.
I move that we accept in the second and final reading policy CBA, qualifications of superintendent, as presented in Exhibit D.
Do we have a second? Ms. Hutchison seconds. Is there any further discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to item number 18, which is a request for waiver on online testing requirements for the spring of 2018, shown in Exhibit E. Do we have a motion? Ms. Baumgartner.
I move that we request a waiver for online testing requirements for spring 2018 as shown in Exhibit E.
We have a second.
I see.
Mr. Cates seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Cates.
Dr. Harris, I appreciate you answering some of my questions, and I just wanted to follow up with those in public. But we are not, if I understand it, we are not unique in requesting this waiver for districts like ours in the state.
That is correct. We're not unique at all. Several districts throughout the state are making the same requests that we are on tonight, so absolutely right.
Is it accurate to say that one of the challenges that we have for online testing is we recognize we have some challenges within our own infrastructure, but there's also been some difficulty with the test provider and the stability of systems that are really beyond the control of the district. Is that accurate?
That's an accurate statement. We are currently in need of expanding our bandwidth in order to support online testing at all of the schools, the grade levels and subjects that would be tested, as well as in need of additional technical support in order to ensure that our students are getting the best out of their testing experience.
But in addition to that, if I understand the process from last year, even if that was rock solid, 100% in place, that there was difficulty on the test provider's end that impacted not only districts across the state and their ability to complete the online testing without regard to the status of their network or devices or their implementation of their own technology plan. It was more at the provider end than at the district's end.
That's correct. The provider did come forward with duly noted challenges that they shared, and they did report that to us and to all the districts across the state.
Any other discussion? Ms. Hammond?
I have two questions. One, is it an all or nothing? Like if you get the waiver, it's not like some schools could do the online testing within a district and others can't. Is it all or nothing?
There is an option for schools a district to determine if they want to do some tests on paper administration and others on online. That gets really confusing in a lot of ways, to be quite honest with you, and we are of the opinion that we would want to ensure the reliability of online testing and making certain that we can do 100% and not a 90% effort in this cause. So with that, we're going to request that waiver for the coming spring.
It would be for all of our schools?
That's correct.
And then my other, is there a limit on the number of times of a waiver that gives us time, or not just us, but any district that has time to find the resources or use, however, whatever it is we need to upgrade in order to do it properly? Do we have a time limit on that with the state?
There's not a stated limit. We were under the impression, Ms. Hammond, on last year that we would have a one-year opportunity to request a waiver. We learned a few months ago that the waiver would be afforded and extended to us again this year. So I'm not certain that I can share with you with all certainty that there is a time frame. I can say that we are under the understanding that we are all moving toward an opportunity where we will all test online at some point. But I don't know that there's been a limit specifically given to us.
Thank you.
Ms. Hutchison?
I had a question about, two questions, actually. One is whether or not the school districts receive any money to help support the expansion of the infrastructure or the, I don't know, the computers? And then the second question that follows that, are there any discussions statewide about changing this requirement? I cannot imagine that if, we're having a problem with the bandwidth and, the great expense and, just everything. But I can imagine that there are so many school districts in the state that, they're having a hard time keeping leaks out of the classroom and really, bad situations. So, one, do we get any type of, or do school districts get any financial help? And two, are there any discussions to do away with this requirement until the state or something can be changed to make it fair for all school districts?
I'll answer the second part of that, and then I'm going to yield to Mr. Richardson to address the financial question that you have. There's conversation, but I don't know if there's anything specifically determined that we would do away with this option here. As I stated earlier, everything is moving toward online testing. There's some conversations, but I don't know to my knowledge, not a determining any final determinations yet as to whether or not we will ban this particular approach and go back to paper administration alone. I've not heard that. We continue to listen out for that. As with everything, everything is electronic, and as it is right now, that appears to be the wave, and that appears to be the move toward the future. So we certainly keep our eyes and ears to the ground to make certain that if there are opportunities that we can do away with this, so we certainly want to make sure that you're aware of that. But as it is right now, as I sit here tonight, I don't know that there is a definitive response that no, we're going to ban online testing. Instead, it's just simply to move forward with online as it is right now. So.
And to answer your first part of your question, there was some funding, I guess probably, I don't recall if it's been 2 or 3 years ago, Governor Haley actually made it a point to send take lottery funds and for school districts, approximately $29 million per year. Of that, we got about $500,000 per year that we've used towards upgrading our infrastructure. We also utilized E-rate funding, which is a federal match for us to help us. So we made great strides in that. Some of the poorer districts that you're speaking of actually got a bigger piece of the pie of that Haley money, I guess. So they've made great strides in trying to get their infrastructure and their technology up to snuff in order to be able to do this. Part of our issue, we've made great strides. We're still work in progress, but part of the issue is the bandwidth that we've got coming into some of our elementary schools now. We have to rely on the state to provide that additional bandwidth. We've made the request. We don't have it yet. Obviously, hopefully sometime during this year we will, but we don't know that for a fact. That's up to the Department of Education, the K-12 Technology Partnership. So we're awaiting word on when and if that's going to happen.
If I might just add something to what Dr. Harris said to the second part of your question. There is, conversation among superintendents and instructional leaders in our state about the online testing. My personal opinion is that's a train that's rolling, and it's going to clearly move in the direction of online testing. The biggest area of concern of which I'm aware is the whole area of English language arts. I think the feeling is that the test that we have there is more a test of a student's technology literacy than it is of their English language literacy. So there's certainly conversation going on about all of this, but I think the prevailing opinion is that we're clearly headed toward online testing at all grades, all subjects, with the greatest conversation being around English language arts at the early grades.
Ms. Hutchinson.
In the discussions, are there certain, which children are going to be most hurt by this? I mean, I could see where if English is a second language, or you mentioned the technology skills, I worry about the equality of this test and whether it will really disadvantage people.
I think that's a legitimate thing to be worried about. And again, I do think that certainly students are disadvantaged if they don't have the devices in their possession that are the same devices that are used for the test. So I think that's a legitimate concern. I think it's not so much elementary, but certainly throughout the rest of the testing world, it's a place where South Carolina is pushing faster and harder than most of the other states in the nation. So I think it's incumbent upon our state that we have the tools that we need to place in our students' hands, and that we have the resources that we need for people to be proficient in using those devices. We're certainly intending to make sure we're prepared to do well. So I think it's coming.
Ms. Hammond, and then we'll call on Mr. Cates.
Just to give you perspective on some of the questions, as a teacher sitting in a classroom, the technology and the online testing is what the children prefer. And it is, the one-on-one, they all have a tablet, and we did do the online testing in Lexington too last year, and will again this year. It does have problems, but, we're a smaller district, where I work. And we did have to have a lot of tech people on the halls. I'm just telling you the implementation of it that was on every hall, and so that you had a kid that would get kicked off. It's a time test. These are some of the little things that I'm sure our district looked at that we want to have in place before we do it. But I agree with Dr. Hefner. It really is where it's going. So I think we as a district has to embrace it and hope that the kinks get worked out. But I would just tell you that it's what kids are used to, and it's the way of the future. And most of them prefer, even if they're writing a paper for me in class, they do it online and then send it to the printer, and it's printed for them. And now I have a few that still want to write by hand, and you let them. I'm just telling you, that's probably what's happening in our classrooms too. But it's like a transition happening. But I applaud our district too. And I know Dr. Melton did a great job of explaining it to us the first time we looked at this, that she wants to be totally ready and have it all together when we do it. And that was one of the reasons I asked if we could do it maybe with certain schools. But I understand, and I'm glad you answered that for me, that you'd rather do it all in one. But I would just say that, if you're looking, and I'd like to say this, in helping students, the online testing is really great because you get the test scores back, and you can do, instead of the map testing where you see where a kid is and you want to move them up, we do online testing, and you immediately know in math or in science or in English where are they weak and what do you need to do. And that you can't have that from a hand test that's going to be taken. So I just say that. I know that's where we're going, and it's where we are.
Mr. Cates.
Dr. Harris, one of the reasons for the waiver in the document is our elementary schools do not have one-to-one devices to ensure the mode of instruction is the same mode of the test administration. And that one-to-one can be a little confusing. I know what that means for us with intermediate through high school. We have one-to-one device. Can you tell me what that looks like at the elementary level?
Currently, in talking with our technology director, we're at about a 2-to-1 ratio at the elementary level. We have probably 9 of our 12 schools are somewhere about 2-to-1. So that's an area that we continue to work on to make certain that we can improve those efforts, to make certain that those students have an opportunity to have a device available to them, so that, again, we can ensure that the instructional mode matches the testing mode, and the students are well prepared once it's testing season.
But we're not talking about a take-home device. You're talking about a device available during the day, or are we talking about a district-issued device like we do in intermediate through high school?
Most at the elementary level, it's going to be something made available at the school.
Right, like a carts type system, or
Something
a
along that,
lab, or a
something.
classroom set.
Classroom set, right, on a cart of some sort, exactly right.
Any other, Ms. Hammond.
Can I ask, just sort of behind that, just so I know, in our district, do all the middle schools and the high schools have the one-on-one and they get to take it home? Because that's what we do, and the kids really
At the
use it.
second
You,
level.
you can send Google Classroom, you can put their assignments on it, the parents know what the assignment is. You know, I just want to be sure that we do have that with middle and high school. And do we have the tablet? Is that what we have?
We use the Chromebook.
Chromebook, okay.
Chromebook is
And then they
what's
can
used.
type on that.
That's
Good.
correct.
That makes me happy.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting the request, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. That takes us to item number 19, which is a proposed calendar for 2018-19.